And it's interesting. I was thinking about this the other day. We haven't really done any real coaching carousel stuff here on the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. And it's wild because I remember September, it was like one coaching story after another a year ago. I went back and looked it up. I can't believe this, but as of the first week of October, so essentially where we are now on the calendar, last year we had 5 different schools make coaching changes based on performance alone, okay? We had Nebraska, we had Arizona State, Colorado, Georgia Tech, and Wisconsin. Remember, they fired Paul Chryst in early October. That doesn't even include Brian Harsin, who was let go by Auburn in early November. So last year was just chaos on the coaching carousel. This year's been pretty quiet, right? Mel Tucker obviously is a professional matter. Pat Fitzgerald is kind of a personal conduct matter. So nobody let go as of right now because of performance. And I don't know how many are actually going to be let go as the season goes on. Still don't know that Texas A&M has the money for Jimbo Fisher. Now, I think if it totally goes off the rails, if you're talking about another 5-7 season, they'll find a way. But I think he's probably back next year. West Virginia, we thought was a possibility, but of course they're playing very well right now, sitting at 4-1 overall. So it's been a pretty quiet couple weeks and months on the coaching carousel. At the same time, in the preseason, I do remember mentioning this, and I remember saying, like, there's always a guy or two that comes out of nowhere every single year that we can't possibly see coming, and just keep an eye out on it because it looks quiet. It looks like nothing's going to happen. It looks like changes aren't going to be made. And then something crazy always happens in this sport. And so I bring it up because over the last couple weeks, there is a name that people in the industry, people in the know, people kind of have quietly started whispering in my ear. And it's a name I want to mention. It's a name I want to bring up. It's a name, by the way, that I don't enjoy talking about because I believe he's a good guy. I believe he's a good man, but my job isn't to talk about what I want to talk about or what's right or what's wrong or what feels good or what's warm and fuzzy. My job is to talk about what matters to this audience. And I do think it is worth having a very short conversation on Sam Pittman and where the state of Arkansas football is. Not to say he's definitively going to get fired, not to say that I want him fired, but I do think as time goes on, things are getting uglier and uglier. And again, I think it's at least worth considering. Now, I know what some of you, especially that are not Arkansas fans, are probably thinking. You're like, Torres, you're out of your mind. You're obviously doing this for clicks. This isn't a story. Stop making stuff up. And what I would say is, like, look, if you look at Sam Pittman's total body of work, there's no doubt he has been a good guy, like a good fit for Arkansas, especially in the moment that he was hired. He took over the worst program in the SEC at the time. Chad Morris was a disaster. We all know that. And his record after leaving Arkansas speaks for itself. I mean, Chad Morris was a disaster, okay? And so I bring it up because he took over a really bad program, won a couple games in year one. Year two was 2021. They went 9-4. So it wasn't that long ago. And so for those of you who aren't Arkansas fans, like, Torres, he went 9-4 2 years ago. What are you talking about? Stop making up stories, fake news, whatever. And what I would say is, listen, 2 years ago was really good. Even last year, you go 7-6, you go 7-6 and go to a bowl game. But what you really have to do, you can't just look at the total body of work or the total win-loss record. You have to look at trends. And there's no doubt that this program is trending in the wrong direction. This really even goes back to last year, okay? So it's interesting because they went 7-6 last year, Arkansas did. But it's worth noting they started 3-0 a year ago. So they start 3-0, finish 7-6. That means, I'm not great at math, but it means they finished what? What is that? 4-6 down the stretch. They're currently 2-4 right now. So that means that they are 6-10 in their last 16 games. That is a season and a half of football. They are well below 500. I think even worse, during that same stretch, they have not been good in big games that matter. Not good really against pretty much anybody except for like the dregs of college football. Okay. So again, 6-10 in their last 16. They are 2-10 in their last, they're 2-8, in their last 10 SEC games. The only wins they have, a good win over Ole Miss last year, and then Auburn, literally the week that they fired Brian Harsin. So Brian Harsin loses to Arkansas on a Saturday. He's fired on, I think, Monday of the following week. And so I bring it up because you're talking about the last 10 SEC games. There's essentially one win over a coach that wasn't immediately fired after losing that game. And then beyond that, you did have a loss to Liberty last year. And you had a loss to BYU at home this year. I mean, these are games. I understand it's whatever. You're supposed to win these games at home. Sam Pittman isn't doing it right now. I think beyond that, the product on the field this year has not been good. And I know the loss to LSU was close. I know the loss to Ole Miss was close. But this is a team with a veteran quarterback, a veteran run game, and I know Rocket Sanders has been hurt. And oh, by the way, a head coach which has a background as an offensive line coach. This offense is terrible. And I'm not picking on anyone in specific, whatever. But at the same time, this is the worst offense in the SEC right now. This is the worst offense in the SEC, and it's seemingly getting worse by the week. This is a team that has an O-line, which is a mess. The run game has been hit or miss. They have the second most sacks allowed of anybody in the SEC this year. And so again, it'd be different if, say, Sam Pittman had an offensive background, the offense is humming, this, that, the other thing. But watch this offense. It is really bad. The offensive line can't block. They look confused. And again, I know there's injuries, but offensive line is confused, can't block. And KJ Jefferson is regressing, okay? KJ Jefferson was a guy I remember 2 off seasons ago. People were asking me, they're like, Torres, why does nobody talk about him? He's the most underrated quarterback in the SEC. And I think that is very accurate. This year right now, 67% completion percentage, 12 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. That sounds good. That is down from last year. By the way, he had 5 interceptions all of last year. Already has 6 at the midway point. And of course, 2 years ago, he only had 4 interceptions total in the season in which they won those 9 games. And so I'm not placing it all on him. The O-line hasn't been good. He's clearly not playing with confidence. I think it falls on some of the coaching hires, Dan Enos, the offensive coordinator. I think it falls on whatever is going on in that facility Sunday through Friday that is having an impact on the field and on the field product come Saturday. Beyond that, it's worth noting a couple other things. One, there's been some off the field turmoil. Didn't talk about it last week, but Dan Enos, the offensive coordinator, got caught emailing fans. Fans were emailing him, and he's chirping back at them via email. That's unprofessional. You can't do it. I know that it's frustrating when people are calling you out publicly. I tweeted it the other day. People tell me I suck at my job all the time. I'm sure there's going to be people in the comments section on YouTube on this video telling me that I suck at my job. You can't do it. You can't act that way. You are a public-facing figure at a major university. You're making a lot of money, and you're not performing very well right now. Sam Pittman, I saw a few weeks ago, canceled his social media accounts, talked about mental health at the podium. And listen, mental health is an important thing. I talk about it all the time. My wife works in mental health. It's not to disparage it, but I think it speaks to Sam Pittman starting to feel some of that heat as well. And so I think when you add it all up, a team that's 6-10 in their last 16 games overall, basically a season and a half. They are 2-8 in their last 10 SEC games. There's no real reason to think that it's going to get better either when you consider the offense is regressing. KJ Jefferson will be gone at the end of the year. Like, there's just not a lot of positivity. I think the only good news is there is still time to turn it around, and the schedule is relatively manageable. It's not easy by SEC standards. They play at Alabama this week, so I think we probably have a pretty good idea of how that's going to go. But then from there, you have Mississippi State at home. You have a bye. You have Auburn at home, which is obviously a program in their first year under Hugh Freeze. And then from there, you have at Florida, Florida International in an out-of-conference game, and Missouri in your your big game to end the year. I don't know if Arkansas fans, I don't know if you want me to call it a rival or not. Some people think it is. Some people think it isn't. So I think the positive is that sitting at 2-4, there is a path to get to a bowl game at 6-6. Even if you lose to Alabama this week, Mississippi State at home, Auburn at home, those should be wins. Florida, I think it's kind of a coin toss. Florida's pretty good defensively. I don't really trust their offense. We'll see what they look like by the end of the year. Obviously, Florida International is a win. And then obviously it comes down to Missouri. And so to me, listen, I'm not here to say what will happen, what could happen, what should happen, what won't happen. But what I will say is, in year 4, if you don't get to a bowl, I think that's really tough. I think that probably they'll be favored against Mississippi State, maybe favored against Auburn. You go winless in the SEC, though, there's you can't justify coming back in year 4. And I think that's really the big thing that I'll close with. Not rooting for or against anything. We're just having an honest conversation. My concern would be that year 2, 9-4, 2021, it feels like the high point, and it feels like things have slowly started to crumble ever since then. It's a situation where I was thinking about this before I even started recording this show, is like there aren't a lot of great examples of things going really well in year 1 and year 2, bottoming out in year 3 and year 4, and then picking back up going forward. So we'll see what happens. It's early. Lastly, there is one other thing I want to just throw out there. I do think in the NIL era, it is worth noting. I think fans are going to have a bigger voice going forward. And so I'm not, be clear, not rooting for or against anything. But remember, you're now asking fans to not only pay coaches' salaries, not only pay coaches' buyouts, not only pay assistant salaries, facilities, all of that, but they're helping to contribute to put the roster together. And if you told them in the offseason, we need this much money for this guy and that guy, and I know coaches can't be involved, but we all know they are, they're going to start asking questions when you have a season like this. So listen, I'm not rooting for it for the 11th time. I'm not going to keep saying that. But at the same time, Sam Pittman's got to start delivering results. I think, listen, if they don't get to a bowl game, I can't see him coming back. And I'll leave it at that. Not rooting for anything, but we'll see what happens there.